course, I have many questions surrounding criminal justice reform and your stance on certain legislations. I really stand here as a mom and a member of this community concerned about how gun violence has racked our cities. We are concerned for our safety at not only night, but in the daytime. We are more so concerned for the trouble our children are experiencing. Funding has been allocated by the governor's office to create initiatives to cure gun violence. However, this funding enacted in July and it ends December 31st. While we are grateful to begin the work to address the gun violence that is happening within our communities, this funding limits our ability to truly make change, and we can no longer as a community settle with Band-Aid solutions. My question for you, Congressman Bowman, is how do we truly create long-term systemic change to get to the root causes of gun violence in our communities and create real solutions to tackle this pandemic?
Damn, yo, you sound
I'm sorry, see?
Your question was a dissertation.
See, you know what, leave me alone. This is what happens with us when we get together. This is what happens.
No, so it's the perfect question, actually. And as I mentioned, I just came from a briefing with the DA's office. Everyone can hear me, right? Or no? They can hear me. I think they can hear me. But you can put that there, that's fine.
No, little church mic don't hurt.
No, absolutely. So, great question, and the good news is the federal government is about to pass a reconciliation package, which includes additional funding focused on reducing gun violence and reducing youth violence in our community. So that's good. So whatever funding we have through December will continue. As you know, it's not only about the funding, though. It's about how the funding is invested and how strategic we are in focusing on what the core issues are. And based on my personal experiences and professional experiences and scholarship, a key issue in all of this is trauma. Is the trauma that lives and breathes in our communities from the prenatal stage all the way across the lifespan that continues to go unaddressed. And as the trauma goes unaddressed across the lifespan, a person is more likely to pick up a gun at age 14 than someone who doesn't go with the same amount of trauma. Is anyone here familiar with the term ACEs, or adverse childhood experiences? So, you know, ACEs basically identify the toxic stress and chronic trauma that happens prior to 18 that literally alters brain chemistry and leads to poor education, health, and economic outcomes. And when ACEs are concentrated at an earlier age, between the prenatal stage and age 3, you're really already behind the 8 ball. So pre-K programs are great, 3K programs are great, but literally prenatal to age 2 is probably most important because that's where the brain develops most rapidly. So we need a huge focus on prenatal to age 2 programs for families that may be going through trauma, moms that may be going through trauma, to ensure that that child and that family is growing up in the most nurturing environment possible. So that is a key area. Another key area is, you know, oftentimes we have programs for like kids in high school, so starting at age 14. That's late for a lot of kids, and a lot of kids and people need interventions way earlier than that. So in elementary school, like you know, we were talking briefly about sports programs. There's no way in the world why Mount Vernon shouldn't have track team, soccer team, lacrosse team, all these sports programs in our elementary schools, because when kids are playing a sport or find their passion in any area, it doesn't have to be sports. It could be the arts, it could be science, it could be whatever, but it's about them finding their passion. When they find their passion, they are less likely to pick up a gun later in life. When I was a kid, and sorry for a long answer.
That's okay.
When I was a kid, I knew early on that I wanted to play professional football, or at least try to. And because of that, I didn't do the things that my friends were doing, because I knew it would take me off the path of where I needed to go. My friends were selling drugs in like 5th grade. Like they were crack dealers in 5th grade, and we all know the crack epidemic during that time. They were crack dealers in 5th grade, and I had friends who didn't even reach their 16th birthday. And my sisters who were older and caught up in the street, they have boyfriends who were drug dealers. So I have 4 sisters, I have no brothers. So my best friends in the street were like my brothers. So my sisters would date these guys who were drug dealers, and I remember one took me on a drug run with him when I was like, I had to be like 12. He took me on a drug run with him. I didn't know it was a drug run at the time, let me just say. It was like reflecting back, like, oh snap, he took me on a drug run, that was a drug run. So we're on a train, I lived in Manhattan, we're on a train coming to the Bronx, and we get off in the Bronx, I don't know where we were, we walked through this community, I don't know where we were, but at one point we're in this alley, and he takes out a gun, 25, and starts shooting it in the air. And he says, here, you want a shot? And I'm like, no, I don't want to touch that. But that right there is the fork in the road, right? If I didn't have an awesome mom who made me say my prayers at night and tried to guide me as much as possible up until that point, I might have taken that gun and shot it and liked it, and now I'm carrying it. Yeah. If I didn't want to be a professional football player when I got older, I might have taken that gun, and if I didn't find my passion, I might have shot that gun. If my mother and father didn't have the opportunity to live in a rent-controlled apartment that took me out of the projects and into a different community, I might have made a decision to take that gun. I was lucky in a lot of ways. You know, 8 of my 10 friends maybe weren't lucky and ended up in different situations. Mm-hmm. So it's early childhood programs, prenatal to 2. It's supporting families so they could be better supports for their children. It's helping children find passions. But all of this is through the lens of, I understand that trauma is the thing that is the root of a lot of what comes later. People diagnosed with ADHD. We treat the ADHD. We don't treat the thing that causes the ADHD, which is the trauma. Kids evaluated for special education. We just evaluate them and put them there. We don't think about what causes the learning disability. High suspension rates, even in pre-K. We just discard them and suspend them, but we don't question, why is this happening this way? And ACEs and trauma, this is research that was done 30 years ago, sitting on the shelf in some medical office that we knew about, but we haven't implemented yet in schools. So you gave me a dissertation question. I gave you a dissertation answer. I'm very sorry, but you know, this is my dissertation was written about collaboration within the community school ecosystem. And one of the theoretical lenses was trauma-informed care. So this is like my life's work. And again, just going back, sorry, collaboration, good money coming in, great. But how are we working together to implement that money properly using research-based strategies to end the cycle of trauma and violence and poverty that happens in our communities?
I so agree with you. I mean, we say at the shelter that hurt people, right? And so, of course, when you've done with the trauma and you're infusing more trauma, hurt people, but then also you can't heal in the same environment that you got sick if the factors have not changed. And so that, you know, your mom and your rent-controlled apartment and those things that were able to uproot you out of your environment and create a different platform. And so that's why our communities, per se, we need change. We have to change. We have to create healing-centered environments for our young people to really thrive, because some of them don't have those factors. Mom is not at the house. They don't have an apartment, or their lunch program is the meal that they eat for dinner. And so there's so many factors there, but I appreciate your dissertation.
Yeah.
I mean, there's much more.
I got one more thing to say since you just.
Oh, Lord.
So you used a key word that I didn't use in my answer, and I just want to underscore it. Healing. That's how you respond to trauma. You respond to it with healing. And everything I'm talking about, these programs are all healing-centered programs. When I was principal of a school, we tried to create a healing-centered environment. So we had we were middle school in the Bronx, right around the corner from the projects. We rarely had fights, we rarely had suspensions, we rarely had things like that, because we created a healing-centered environment with a lot of things I'm talking about. Sorry, go ahead.
I'm going to have to control the two of you, I see.
No, we'll definitely move on. There's more that we could talk about, and I know this is 45 minutes, which is never enough time with the Congressman, but we definitely are going to call to the stand Gerandy Martinez, who is the Executive Director of the Community Resource Center in Mamaroneck, New York. So thank you, Durandi, for being here.
Of course, thank you. Should I leave my mask on?
You can take it off.
Okay, I'm vaccinated. Thank you all. Thank you for allowing me to be here, and I'm actually really excited to see a community partner in the room with me because I know we're going through a lot. And my question is a little long just to give context to people who may not know, but I did want to thank you, Congressman, and your team for coming out to see us in Mamaroneck because, as you know, Hurricane Ida caused severe devastation in the community that we serve and that I grew up in. So it's seriously personal to me. I'm going to talk about what happened during the this tropical storm that impacted the community, but there are so many more issues that you know are having a ripple effect. 535 homes flooded, 1,000 people were displaced, several buildings were condemned for safety concerns, 310 cars flooded in the street, that's people's transportation to work and or their working vehicles. 100,000 cubic yards of debris were removed from our village. We also lost a firehouse and 4 police cars and 2 DPW trucks, and we have a damaged bridge and $18 million in losses. But the Coalition for Community, it's a coalition that the CRC is a part of, also identified that our community members have resorted to sleeping in parks and tents and their cars and are returning to their condemned buildings at night because they have nowhere to go. Public policies often lead to cascading and devastating consequences for people, thank you, who experience climate events. In New York, and especially in Westchester County, the lack of accessible and affordable housing has led to low-income workers and families having to live in basement apartments where they are more vulnerable to flooding. Even for those who were able to evacuate safely, the affordability crisis and gentrification mean that they now have to move to another community and probably another basement where they will be equally vulnerable. I am now understanding that FEMA is making it accessible for undocumented workers and undocumented people to apply for funding, but that should have been a given from the very beginning. And I know we have advocates in the room who have ensured that FEMA and Red Cross and DSS are taking these families' cases seriously, regardless of their immigration status. But had they not been there advocating for them every step of the way, they probably would not have received any immediate support. So that's one issue, is housing. But also the Village of Mamaroneck has learned that their long needed and anticipated Army Corps flood project to mitigate flooding in our community, Mamaroneck, the Village of Mamaroneck is a flood zone, was not included in the budget plan and needs it to be included because it's existential to the future of our village. I don't think that as a community we should be worried when there's an intense rain. For us to worry about our village flooding and our homes being condemned or losing everything, like that kind of stress, especially after a pandemic year, and just the people that live in Washingtonville, that area that you visited, those are poor people. They're people without documents. They work their asses off to live in the community that they do, and now they can't live there anymore. So my question is, what will you do to ensure that we get that flood project reinstated? And what are we going to do about the housing crisis in Westchester County?
So thank you for your question, and thank you for sharing those stories. So good news is the reconciliation bill has tens of billions of dollars, maybe hundreds, I need to get the exact number, in it for affordable housing specifically and public housing, which is a huge, huge win. It was a priority for many activists in this room. It was a priority for Chairwoman Maxine Waters. It's something that I ran on and fought for, and that is in the reconciliation bill as we speak. Now, I don't think it is going to be taken out in the Senate, because I know it's also a priority for Senator Schumer, who was with me today, who mentioned it as a priority. So the housing money is there, which is good. The reconciliation bill has already been written up with each committee, and if that flood damage money was taken out, we have to fight in the Senate to hopefully get it back in, and I will be on the phone with Chuck Schumer right after this meeting to make sure we can get that money back in. If it doesn't get put back in, then we need to write legislation for emergency funding to rebuild Mamaroneck in a way that makes it sustainable and protects it against severe weather events. It's crazy to me how shortly after getting into office, I met with leaders in Mamaroneck who told me they've been fighting this issue for decades, like 30 years. It's constant flooding in Mamaroneck. And it's mind-boggling because we continue to have policy that doesn't focus on humanity. Instead, it focuses on, again, competition and wealth building for some and not others. And we will leave people to suffer and die and not even think twice about it. We all, and I need all of us to do this, and it needs to be done nationally. We need to push for policy that is rooted in humanity. Mm-hmm. And if people, my Republican colleagues and some moderate Democrats, they always want to say America first, and, we got to beat China and, America, America, America. If they really felt that way, then they would do whatever they could to uplift all Americans, everyone who's in this country, because when you uplift all, then our country becomes better as a result of it. But that's still a fight that we have to have in Washington. And if you watch the news, you see, me going at it with Manchin or AOC going at it with someone else, because we're still fighting to maintain this status quo where corporations and the wealthy, the elite, dictate policy that's not rooted in humanity at all. So I'm going to be in contact with Senator Schumer right after this to see what we can do about that, the emergency money that Mamaroneck needs. I know, well, to my knowledge, I want to say I know, I've heard that Senator Schumer put it in before and it was taken out. I've heard that, so I know it's a priority for him. The thing about this reconciliation package is once we start talking about that top line number, 3.5 trillion, now no one thinks we can go above it. So everybody's saying 3.5, 3.5. I was at the distribution center in Mamaroneck the day after the storm to see if they, just helping out, right? Just helping organize things. And someone from Mamaroneck told me he was concerned about the 3.5 trillion because he was worried about inflation and he didn't want me to vote for it. And I tried to tell him the reason why I'm fighting so hard for that is to prevent what just happened in Mamaroneck. Because we have to stop climate change from getting worse, and we have to rebuild our country. And after the conversation, he understood, but I think so many people still, they're thinking like, oh, the federal government, we don't want to have inflation, we don't want to have this big debt. But my answer is, how much is a human life worth? Right? Like, people lost their lives, people lost their homes, they lost their businesses, houses of worship were destroyed. I saw it all. And that's just in Mamaroneck. It happened throughout the district. It was in Rye, it was in Pelham, it was in Mount Vernon, it was everywhere. So that fight for a policy rooted in human rights, we all have to take that fight, and it has to be a national fight. Because the powers that be, the people who have been in power for a very long time, they're fighting as well. So yeah, it's just crazy to me that we even have to have this conversation. And we've been having the same conversation for decades.
And I would say that of course, our heartfelt prayers continue to go out to those who were affected by Hurricane Ida, locally and abroad. And so, Durandi, we continue to pray and uplift our, neighbors in Mamaroneck. We are going to
Can I
move
say
on.
one other thing?
And I want to get to her second question, but I know that's going to be added at the end too as well.
Which
in regards
one?
to housing, so.
Well, I answered the house. I thought I answered the house.
No, oh. you
I
did?
answered the house.
Okay,
I
we're
wanted
gonna
to say
come back
one
to
other
that.
thing, just about the federal government and spending. So, state governments have to have balanced budgets. City governments have to have balanced budgets. Federal governments have flexibility. Federal governments can authorize spending for something. Like if something is needed, if we say we need $1 billion to rebuild Mamaroneck and places like it, we could just, it's digits on a computer. It's not real, right? It's not. It doesn't exist. Think about that. So they could literally say, all right, we just put $1 billion, and then that $1 billion goes to jobs. Those people in those jobs rebuild the city. They pay taxes. The city's rebuilt. You got businesses that pay taxes, right? And then over time, you get the money back. And the American economy grows overall. It's not, it's fake. Like, it's like states and cities are different. The federal government authorizes spending. It did for the Homestead Act, it did for the New Deal, it did for the war in Afghanistan. Where'd that money come from? They authorized it. They said spend $2.2 trillion. Voila, it happened. We don't all have, who got cash in their wallet right now? We don't follow it. We don't track it based on trees and cash. It's digits in a computer. So the federal government can authorize spending in any way that it wishes, and it claims that it doesn't want to do it because of inflation and debt. But they won't tax the wealthy. Because if they did, debt taken care of. We have 2 bills right now that we're ready to introduce. One is called Babies Over Billionaires, where we tax unrealized capital gains, unrealized wealth that's just sitting there chilling. Tax unrealized capital gains at 39%, which the president wants to do. We would raise $1 trillion over 10 years. So that's $1 trillion. We have another bill. Guess what? We know exactly which fossil fuel companies have destroyed the environment. We did research. We know who the 25 to 50 companies are. Make them pay to clean up what's been going on in the environment. That's another $1 trillion over 10 years. 2 bills take care of $2 trillion of the 3.5. So these people are lying to us, and we got to stop with the lies and focus on humanity.
I like when you get warmed up. We're in church, so let's move on. So, Judith, we're gonna. That's right. No, we like when truth comes to light. We truth to power. So, next we're gonna call up Judith Watson, who's the CEO of the Mount Vernon Neighborhood Health Center. We're good.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes.
These things are never high enough, right?
Not for you. Not for you.
And yes, just because I know you have the question, so let me just answer it. Yes, I am a giant, okay? Pastor Grant, thank you so much for hosting us. Jan Fisher, thank you so much for coordinating and organizing this. Joanne Dunn, you as well. Love you so much. Congressman Jamaal Bowman. Now, I'm not going to go on and on because there are a lot of people here, and as you can see, he talks, okay? And the reason why he talks so much is because maybe once in a lifetime, lightning strikes in a bottle. That's who this is.
Agreed.
I refer to him oftentimes as the real deal. And as I'm sitting here and I'm learning more about him, Mom worked for the post office, and as I'm learning more about him, I realized, I thought it was just based on what I knew and what I felt. But I hear today why I call him the real deal. He is not playing. He is serious. He is here for us. We are represented. We have a seat at the table now. And so I'm not going to go on and on. Mount Vernon Neighborhood Health Center is a federally qualified community health center providing healthcare services here in Mount Vernon, in Greenburgh, in Yonkers, and Valhalla at our 8 locations. We provide healthcare regardless of ability to pay and regardless of immigration status. And this congressman has supported us in the short time that he's been in office. Millions of dollars brought into the Mount Vernon Neighborhood Health Center organization that's been in existence for 50 years so we can continue to provide health care for those who live among us who don't have anything. Many of them have nothing, but they can come to us for health care, and we have a representative now at the table who can advocate for us. And so I just want to say thank you, sir. You have our support. We love you. We appreciate you, and we see you.
Yes. Come on now.
Thank you.
I'll end there, but I will say that I'm here not only representing the Mount Vernon Neighborhood Health Center, but a proud member of the Board of Directors of nonprofit Westchester, for which Jan Fisher, another person who's the real deal, heads. Thank you all very much. I have another event. I love you. Keep up the good work.
Love you too. Thank you. Thank you. No question. No, she wanted to make a statement.
Judith is not just a giant because she's tall, but she's a giant.
Yeah,
in
she's
work
the
that
real
she-
deal.
She's the real deal.
She's the real deal.
Okay, so we appreciate her and all the work she does here in our community and abroad, in Greenburgh, everywhere, Yonkers, and Mount Vernon. So I'm going to call on Stephanie Marcasano, who is the founder and president of the Harris Project, and is going to ask our next question.
Hello, everybody, and thank you. I have not had the pleasure of meeting you yet, Congressman, and my hope is that the next time I see you, I am one of those people that you call out and reference.
Got it.
Because hopefully, when I talk about what I have to talk about, you will see something in it that connects with you. So my thank yous, of course, to Joanne and to Jan and to everybody and to my friends who I've done work with. When you think about collaboration, and there's not one word that you've said that does not resonate with me, I started an organization called the Harris Project. I'm an Ardsley, New York resident at my kitchen table after my 19-year-old son died by accidental overdose. My son Harris had something called co-occurring disorders, which is the combination of one or more mental health challenges and substance misuse. Every program he went into said that they treated co-occurring disorders. Each one failed to address the mental health piece, which led to the recurrence, and the cycle repeated itself. Our focus is prevention. I do programming in every Westchester County school district. I work with Mount Vernon, and Greenburgh, and New Rochelle, and Mamaroneck, and you name it. Where they're Yonkers, we're there. We do treatment work. We actually are working with the youth shelter through one of our providers, the Guidance Center of Westchester, to actually do evidence-based treatment for our young people with co-occurring disorders. One of the biggest lifts for our work is the systems transformation piece, tearing down the silos and bringing our mental health and substance use agencies together. In New York State, as you know, we have 2 siloed agencies. I've worked with Senator Harcum. The Senate has passed a bill to integrate the agencies. We're working hard to get the Assembly to do the same. From the federal level, and I'm not even looking at my notes anymore because that's just me, but from the federal level, President Bush actually wrote the Freedom Act, which included co-occurring disorders awareness and care. SAMHSA created the agency, the Substance Abuse Mental Health Services Administration, which I thought when I first heard, I'm an attorney by training, like this is it, like this is, and they've actually written the gold standard in treatment. But nobody uses it because of the way that our states have the power to determine how funding is spent. But when you look at this moment in time, the post-COVID-19 as we're emerging world, the additional funding that's available, the Recovery Act, the opioid settlement funds, I've worked with the AG's office, and in that language is co-occurring disorders, right? It's not just opioids and use. What they didn't realize was there is no system of care to address co-occurring disorders. So those words are hollow if we cannot actually deliver integrated assessments, integrated treatment plans, integrated billing, integrated Medicaid redesign to actually treat this. You talk about trauma, you talk about your history. I'm thinking, I've read your bio, but now I feel what you know. I know that we're going to have a very fruitful and positive impact on the system. I mean, Rob Kent, who was with Oasis, is now working for President Biden. Even he can't do the lift without the legislators. Right. So the question to me will be, what can we do legislatively to finally tear down the silos, to finally, you read the articles, overdoses are on the rise, alcohol-related deaths. Every one of those articles is siloed and separate. I look at those numbers collectively. Our young people who are substance involved, they're dying by overdose, they're dying by suicide. None of this changes. And so those end results can be effectively impacted through a system of care that's designed to meet those needs. So I'm soapboxing. I don't necessarily think that you're going to have an answer today.
I have an answer.
Okay, then that's exciting.
I have an answer. So you and I are going to write a piece of federal legislation together to address this issue that you're referring to. And the reason why I'm saying that is because you have the personal experience. So sorry to hear about your son.
Thank you.
And your life's work is on this issue. And what you're talking about, that's why in my opening remarks I mentioned collaboration. It's exactly what we need at this time. Our office is already doing some work around what we call interagency collaboration. Because you're right, every agency is siloed, every issue is reported as a silo, but it's all part of the same issue. It comes from the same root. To my knowledge, and we'll look into this, I know my staff is taking notes as I'm speaking, we'll look into if any federal legislation has been introduced to address this issue. It's a chance that maybe there has been, but for whatever reason, it's not getting over the finish line. You probably already looked, no, it doesn't. Okay, so you and I gotta write it. And not just you and I, you, me, and others that you work with who believe in this and understand how it should be written so that it can get the support that it needs. I'm on the Ed and Labor Committee as well as Science and Tech. I don't know if those committees would have jurisdiction, maybe, maybe not, but I can introduce any legislation I want. A committee gains jurisdiction, and then we work to build relationships with that committee to help it over the finish line. And we've been doing a good job of building good relationships with committees and leadership where, they're supportive of our ideas, especially because of my education background. I think in the meantime, our advocacy for interagency collaboration at a local level is really, really important. I know you're already doing it, but the more we can all do it, the better things can move.
100%.
We wrote a letter to Governor Hochul yesterday or the day before about this exact issue. We've been engaged in New York City and the Department of Education specifically about this issue because, again, schools are the catch-all to so much. And I often tell a story. When I was a principal, it was easier for me to suspend a kid from school or call the cops to my school than it was for me to get them mental health services. Easy. I could do it in one day. Kid does something on a Monday, I put it in the computer, suspension, approved on a Monday. Cop needed, they'll come right away. But if I had a student, and I often had students who were committing self-harm, it was so hard to get them the mental health supports that they needed. If I had students who came from homes where domestic violence was taking place, I remember I sat on the phone on hold for hours trying to get an answer for that student and family to get them out of a situation where they were being stalked and potentially harmed. So short term, let's work together on advocacy and strategic advocacy. Long term, and by long term I mean like a couple of months, not a couple of years, let's write the federal legislation and introduce it to get this moving. Because this is, in my opinion, this is everything. Same thing I said earlier about money, 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 but if we get in 100 billion and it's spent wrong, we're gonna have the same problems. And I didn't say this before, but I want to say it now because you reminded me. Even law enforcement doesn't collaborate in the way that they should in terms of locally and federal, local, state, and federal. Because if they did, they would be smarter about trafficking that continues to happen in our high-need communities, trafficking of guns and trafficking of drugs. That's the other issue. Like 70% of the gun crimes in New York State are done by guns purchased out of state because of New York's strict gun laws. So strengthening in-state trafficking laws, but national common sense gun reform, which we already passed the House but hasn't passed the Senate, is what we got to do as well. So Yeah, let's talk right after
And
this.
we're big collaborators. I mean, we work with our hospitals, agencies, and providers across the whole Mid-Hudson. Not anybody gets reimbursed for it. There is not major grant funding. This is the commitment to the work because everybody knows what's missing in the system.
Yes.
So it's been a labor of love, but a lot of frustration. And so I'm looking forward to continuing the conversation.
Let's write the legislation. Thank you.
I think Stephanie is phenomenal. We met about a year ago, and since then, because we work with young people who are disconnected, and the access that they have had through the Guidance Center of Westchester and the Harris Project in regards to just getting assessed for mental health needs, and then getting the access to the care that they need, the continuum of care, has been phenomenal. And so, Stephanie, you are a giant. You are the real deal, and so we appreciate you and all you do. So we have one more question. And one more question is going to be Michelle Nicholas, who is now at PCSB Bank. And so please come to the podium.
Okay. So good afternoon, Congressman.
Good afternoon.
I welcome you not just as, yes, Jan, I speak very quietly. I welcome you not just as a member of First United Methodist Church, not just as a resident of Mount Vernon proudly, not just as the vice chair of the Westchester Women's Agenda, but also as a proud member and vice president of nonprofit Westchester. In 2011, when my mother arrived to the United States, just 10 days later, she suffered a cardiac arrest. We lived very close to the Mount Vernon Hospital. And within the first 24 hours, they basically told us it was 50-50. I stood outside of the hospital calling my sister, telling my sister, plan for my mother's funeral. We are right now in the space where hearing that we may no longer have the Mount Vernon Hospital, right? That would mean that we would have to go either all the way over to New Rochelle, or we have to go to the Bronx 233rd. That makes absolutely no sense. Knowing that the doctor said to me that if my mother was not living close by, she would have been gone. That's not okay. Mount Vernon needs a hospital. We need a center. We need a space for us. Every single city really has locations for medical care, and we just can't go to urgent care. I say this because I am grateful that my mother received care at the Mount Vernon Hospital, but I will tell you that the care that my mother receives now is at Mount Sinai. She goes to Mount Sinai at least 5 times a month for her care. Unacceptable. So I'm asking you, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? Thank you.
Love the question.
And I love how you position it. What are you going to do?
So shortly after getting into office, I helped organize and attend 2 rallies outside Mount Vernon Hospital because they was looking to close it a year ago. And we came together with the mayor, Senator Schumer, and others to fight and organize to keep it open for another year. The fight continues because they're still trying to close it down. Healthcare, the privatization of healthcare in the country is the major issue. And wherever they see, the profiteers see an opportunity to make a profit, that's what they're doing. And wherever they're losing profit, they try to take it away. So our fight on a national level for universal health care is a big part of this fight. And what some call Medicare for all, it could also be called universal health care, is something that, I co-sponsored a bill fighting for that, and we're still fighting for that at the federal level. At a local level, because this is more local than federal, statewide, I need to learn more about, and we need to learn more about what has happened with Mount Vernon Hospital over time and in the healthcare system to get us to this point where now they're trying to take it away. And then we need to figure out what to do to reverse that to make sure that it stays. To my knowledge, the previous governor had something to do with some of that. And with the new governor, there are new opportunities to revisit this issue and figure out what's what. So you have my commitment to reach out to the new governor to figure out what's what with it, to see what we can do to make sure the hospital stays. I think at the core of it, as I mentioned, is the for-profit healthcare system and the impact of health insurance companies in this equation that I don't fully understand. It's not my number one issue, but the new governor gives an opportunity for new conversations. So you have my commitment to reach out to her and see what's what. And then you and I can continue the conversation to figure out what the next steps are. Because what I've learned, what I knew in education and what I knew and did in education and what I've done so far as a member of Congress is when enough people organize and put pressure in the right places, change happens. I'll give you 3 quick examples. One, when the House did not vote to extend the eviction moratorium and my sister Cori Bush and AOC took over the Capitol steps and slept there, joined the next day by myself and others to bring attention to that issue, President Biden, within 8 days, signed an extension of the eviction moratorium. Actually, it wasn't 8, it was like 5 days, which saved people's lives from not being evicted. Second example is, recently on the Ed and Labor Committee, they were trying to not make child care universal. They were trying to fund it at 200% of area median income. We said no, it needed to be universal. No one needed to pay more than 7% of their income for child care across the country. We organized, we fought, we told the chair we wouldn't support the whole bill if we didn't have this part. Shout out to Mondaire and Mickey Sherrill for writing an amendment to the bill, and we got made child care universal. Third and final example. I visited Rikers on Monday with other elected officials. It's horrific in there, to say the least. Went on Pix 11 the next day along with my colleagues to bring attention to that issue. Today, the governor signed the Less is More Act, which is going to release people in Rikers who are there on technical parole violations. So they're going to release hundreds of people, which shouldn't have been there in the first place. My point is, with Mount Vernon Hospital, it's not just an event, it's not just a rally, it's organizing, figuring out where to put the pressure, putting the pressure towards change. So you have my commitment to reach out to the governor, but then also figure out the pressure points going forward so that we could keep it open.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
So we are almost at the end of our program, and so we're going to offer an opportunity for the Congressman and Jan Fisher to give final words. Jan's been quiet over here, but I'm sure she has something to say. So.
I don't really have much to say except thank you all. Everybody in this room is important. We have board members, we have direct line workers here, we have CEOs, EDs. You are all part of our organization and you are really, really important. And thank you for the work you do. Thank you to my friend and colleague, Joanne. Thank you to our board, and thank you, Congressman, for taking the time to be here with us. It means so much.
Yes. Thank you. No, I'm going to be quick. So thank you all for being here. It was great. I'm sorry I talked so much. I don't know what happened. I'm usually like kind of concise. I hate hearing myself talk, but this was great. Thank you. Please be in touch with us. Like, this is not, and I have the best staff in the business, and it's really important for you to remain in touch with us on these issues. It's not just about an event. This is about going forward. What are we building? And I believe we're all in the process of building something very special together. So let's be in touch. I would give you my cell phone number, but Ashley would be mad at me, so I'm not going to do that. but be in touch with my staff and let's get things done. Can we please give a round of applause to my staff? Ashley, District Director, Quantel, Deputy District Director. They keep me prepared and on point so that I can look good in front of you all. So thank you.
I would say that Quantel and Ashley, they are wonderful. And when the Congressman says that he is just not about an event or just being, for the press, he's really about the work. And I have to say that because I see him everywhere. He is out there. He is in it. He is Jamaal, and I think that that's really important, that he is out there and he's in the work. And so we appreciate all you do for our communities and all the work that you have given. And like I said, he is in it. He is the real deal. And I thank all of you for coming. We were just getting revved up. We probably could have went a whole nother 45 minutes, but we know time is of the essence. And I'm sure if we asked, the Congressman would come back for part 2. So thank you all for being here.
Oh.